regulations hit the crypto space, one coin will emerge unscathed. Spencer Bogart is a partner at Blockchain Capital, which invests in a variety of crypto assets. Spencer, great to see you again. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Which is the one coin that will emerge unscathed? Because it looks like the price action is showing that every coin is getting hit at this point.
So to say unscathed might be to go too far. But listen, when we're separating Bitcoin, which is the one coin that we're discussing here, from the rest of them, it's certainly the least risky here, right? So what's going on in the market this week? There's a lot of regulatory concern about from the SEC and from the CFTC, right? The SEC is the 900-pound gorilla in the room. The SEC is primarily concerned with securities, right? And the SEC has delineated that some crypto assets are securities and some are not. Now, along a spectrum, Bitcoin is the furthest away from being a security out of all of the crypto assets, in my opinion, and therefore it is the least likely to kind of come under a regulatory crackdown. Now, that said, I think that the long tail of ICOs and tokens that have come out, some of them are going to be at risk, and some of them could face liquidity crunches in the coming weeks.
Now, why is it that Bitcoin is the furthest away from being a security? It's because the money that people, if I buy Bitcoin, that money doesn't go towards a business or towards a core group? I mean, that's the thinking?
Sure. So the SEC has an established framework for thinking about this, and a core portion of that framework is the Howey test. There's 4 prongs to the Howey test. Listen, I am not a securities attorney, so definitely do not rely on my advice here. But a big portion of this is that investors contribute money to a common enterprise with the expectation of profit based primarily on the benefit from or the efforts of others. So in the case of Bitcoin, that's just never has been the case. There was nobody that launched Bitcoin and said, here, I'm going to sell you 20% of the coins for a specific price, right? The software was launched into the world, people started mining it, and it grew organically. There is no central enterprise that receives the money that investors pay for Bitcoin and then deploys it, right? This is a decentralized network with decentralized participants.
Hey, Spencer, do you think that's one reason why Ethereum or Ether in particular has underperformed over the last couple of months versus Bitcoin? Because for all intents and purposes, it was an ICO, and there's a lot of ICOs that are built on top of its platform.
Yeah, I think it's more the latter that could be weighing on Ethereum this week. So you're right that Ethereum did itself have an ICO several years ago. That said, I think that if we read between the lines of what the SEC has said prior, it seems to indicate that they do not consider Ethereum to be an ICO. To be a security. But several of the tokens that have launched on top of Ethereum likely are being deemed securities. And if so, we consider Ethereum to kind of be the feedstock or the fuel that people use to participate in these ICOs. Then in that case, we should expect demand to dwindle at least a little bit in this regulatory crackdown.
How does this sort of changing landscape on regulation as it concerns ICOs, Spencer, impact the way you look at ICOs right now and decide whether or not you want to buy them as the rules are being created?
Sure. So, I mean, if we look at something and, our counsel or the people that we depend on, seem to indicate that something is a security, then we're going to want to see a project that follows all securities regulation. That means doing the appropriate filings and restricting your sales to the appropriate investors that are suitable for that type of an investment. That said, not all of the crypto assets that we invest in are necessarily securities. So some of them can be, crypto assets like Bitcoin that certainly are not securities. And in that case, we're a little bit less concerned about the securities framework and a little bit more concerned about the long-term viability of the economics.
It'll be interesting how ICOs now market themselves in relationship to this. I mean, I would imagine that ICOs, from their standpoint, all they would say is, you know what, this is almost like a donation. There's no expectation of a shared profit in the future. I mean, that's essentially what Tezos' co-founders have said in relationship to the investigation that supposedly is going on into the $232 million they raised in an ICO. They said this is like a donation and the token you get is a gift bag, implying there is no expectation of profit. I mean,
a tote bag, I believe it is.
A tote bag. Oh, yeah, I thought it was, sorry, I remember it was a gift bag. But, the same impact here. The marketing is going to change greatly. So we won't really, do you really think that you're going to get paperwork from an ICO which says, hey, we're just like a securities. Here's our papers. Take a look.
Oh, definitely. Some of them definitely are taking that approach. So, we're seeing across the whole spectrum. So we're seeing some that are going the straight securities route, are doing all the appropriate filings and restricting their sale in an appropriate manner. And then we're seeing others that clearly think that they are outside of that, and that might be the right approach. Again, it kind of remains to be seen here. But I
Yeah.
don't think that you can just change your marketing pitch and expect that regulators are all of a sudden just going to give you breathing room.
Yeah.
It's more substantial than that.
Lots of developments here in the space. Spencer, thanks so much. Always good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Spencer Bogart. Wow.
I look at it, in my opinion, you heard about Ethereum. Like, my view is that we're going to have the adults get into this game, the institutional investors, the real money come in. You need to have regulation to some extent. And I understand that it's going to be a little near-term painful and there's going to be a hiccup. There absolutely are some bad actors out there that are going to get shaken out. But right now, we're looking at a setup where it's really an incredible buying opportunity from my perspective in the Ethereums of the world, these protocol layer tokens that sort of have real utility value. I look at it and say, you shouldn't be taking your foot off the gas here. You should be stepping in and making sure that you're adding to your positions.
So let's play in the stock game. So Patrick Burns, the CEO of Overstock, and that stock has effectively been trading lockstep with the cryptocurrencies for a long time. Steve Grasso pointed this out months ago. But today, interesting, right? All these crypto names lower. Overstock was actually up 3% today. Maybe that's your first tell on this name for a long time. They report in a couple weeks. I don't think that earnings necessarily are a catalyst. But for the first time in a while, this stock is sort of decoupling from the cryptocurrencies.